G'day, ZiggyD here with another Path of Exile guide. In this video I'm going to be giving you guys an in-depth guide to the Fire Trap skill. This includes everything from the basics of how it works, to advanced skill, passive and support gem interactions. To kick things off, I'll begin with the basic explanation of how the skill works. As its name suggests, Fire Trap is a trap skill, which is considered a special form of spell in Path of Exile. Essentially, you throw a trap at the ground, which then casts its secondary effects when an enemy enters its trigger radius. For Fire Trap, these secondary trigger effects are an initial fire damage explosion, and then a fire-based damage over time ground effect. The damage of both of these effects are not reliant on your weapon like attack skills are, instead they are tied to the gem's level, which can be seen in the table on the screen. As such, items that increase socketed fire gem levels are one of the best ways of increasing Fire Trap damage overall. It takes 1 second to throw a fire trap, and when you do, a 30-second timer begins, after which the trap will expire and break. Each time you do this, an 8-second timer begins to refresh that particular trap. You can throw down 3 traps immediately, after which you must wait 8 seconds per trap for them to be available again. By default, you can have a maximum of 3 traps set on the ground at any one time. Throwing an additional trap when you are at this limit disables the oldest one that is currently set. When an enemy enters the trap's radius, the fire explosion and burning ground effect goes off. The passive skill tree has a number of trap-specific buffs that can affect these mechanics, including improving trap laying speed, increasing the duration before a trap expires, increasing trap trigger radius, and increasing the number of traps you can have set down at one time. The most beneficial of these to the fire trap, in my opinion, are laying speed and trigger radius. One thing to clarify here is that although Fire Trap is considered a spell, it is not affected by cast speed passives or the faster casting support gem, at least not in the way you might think. When you link faster casting to Fire Trap, the tooltip DPS does go up, however this is very misleading. This increase in cast speed does not mean that you can lay the traps faster, only trap laying speed affects that. What cast speed actually affects is the time it takes for the trigger animation to play on the trap itself, which is minuscule by default. As such, don't be duped by the tooltip into thinking that your DPS is higher with faster casting on your fire traps. In practice, the difference is non-existent. So now, with the trap-specific mechanics covered, I'll cover the initial fire explosion and what you can do to augment it. The fire explosion is immediate damage and can be buffed through increased fire or global elemental damage nodes. It can also be buffed through passive or gear increases to spell damage. As it is also direct damage, you can even use the support gem's added cold damage or added lightning damage to increase the overall burst damage the explosion does. Reducing your enemy's fire resistance through elemental equilibrium or through the flammability and elemental weakness curses can also help buff the damage of the initial fire explosion. The explosion also counts as an area of effect, so AoE damage and radius passives can also be effective. The final thing to note is that this explosion also has a base 5% critical strike chance, and can work with the chance to ignite from flammability and the support gem with the same name. Ignite can also stack with the burning ground effect, so there is some potential to trying to ignite your enemies with the initial explosion. At level 20, the base explosion damage is 812 to 1218, so with some modification it can deal a significant amount of burst damage. And now let's take a look at the much more complicated burning ground secondary effect. The first thing to know is that this effect does not actually hit the enemy. Instead, it is an area-based degeneration. This means it cannot proc on hit effects, it cannot crit, it cannot have damage added to it, and it cannot benefit from fire, elemental, or spell damage mods. So what can you do with it then? The first thing you can do is to buff it through increases to burning damage. Burning damage is available on the Searing Touch unique staff, as the quality bonus on Fire Trap itself, through the increased burning damage support gem, and through increased burning damage passive nodes. The next thing is to lower your enemy's fire resistances in the same ways that you did for the fire explosion. And then the final thing you can do is to cast vulnerability on your enemies to increase the damage they take from damage over time effects. Another thing to note is that although area of effect damage increases don't work on the burning ground damage over time effect, increased area of effect nodes can affect its actual size, which can help with keeping mobs in the flames. On a similar note, you can increase the default 8-second duration of the burning ground through increased skill duration passives and through the increased duration support gem. This can also help with taking down enemies with larger health balls, assuming you can keep them standing in the flames. So with all of this in mind, what is the best way to maximize the effectiveness of the fire trap skill? The first thing to do is to decide whether you're going to try and focus on the initial burst damage, the burning ground, or a combination of both. I personally think the best approach is a combination of both, though it can depend on if your build is trying to do anything else like maximize crit or trying to go to other sides of the tree away from burning damage. As such, I recommend straight off that you put your quality fire trap gem in a searing touch, preferably a 4 or 5 link one. Then you want to support it with a quality increased burning damage, which also adds chance to ignite to the initial fire explosion. Then you can go ahead and support it with increased area of effect to maximize the amount of mobs that you can hit with a single trap. And then another good option is fire penetration, which will increase the damage of the initial explosion and any subsequent ignite effects created by it, although it won't increase the burning ground damage. And then another thing you can do is to add an increased duration support gem, or instead, you can actually socket in another fire trap gem so you don't have to wait it so long on cooldowns while farming. As you're running around farming very quickly, you throw your first trap, you throw your second trap, you throw your third trap, then you might have to wait a few seconds before you can throw another one. So having 2 separate fire traps can actually avoid that. And then finally, I recommend the Pyromaniac and Immolation clusters of passive nodes. In a more general sense, when looking at the passive tree, you should stick with high elemental or fire damage and burning damage nodes. Avoid burning duration nodes, as these won't actually affect the burning ground unless you're going for like a crit ignite sort of build. Also, avoid anything that mentions weapons in the description, as these won't work on the fire trap. Anyway, that's it for now. Fire trap's a pretty exciting skill overall. I have a lot of fun leveling with it, and it can also be quite effective endgame. Hopefully this guide has helped you get the most out of it that you can. That's it for now. I'm ZiggyD, and thanks for watching.